Good morning, Mr. Breeze.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm really well, thank you. How are you?
Very good. I love how polite we've started. A very British way of starting a podcast.
Yes, I like to. We'll start formal. We might. Who knows how far it will decline? How far into the gutter we'll go?
Fair enough.
Man, thank you so much for agreeing to spend this time with me. As you know, I'm kind of on this mission. I feel like I'm kind of dumping everything I know about marketing on the world. So maybe I could give up marketing in a year or two and feel like I've fulfilled my responsibility to the world. They know everything I know. And as part of that, I'm dragging the most interesting people that I've met in marketing in the 15 years that I've been running the Effective Marketing. And you are on that list. So thank you so much for agreeing to spend this time with us.
Of course. Well, thank you. It's a very lovely compliment to start the call off with.
That's okay. You're one of the most interesting people.
One of the most, not the most, just one of the most, yeah.
Well, I suppose if we were looking at the data, you'd be the 11th most interesting person because this is the 11th one that I've done.
How many people do you know on that list?
Well,
11 people on that list.
There's 11 people.
Thanks.
So, and now I'm scraping the barrel. It's not true. I was always intending to speak to you. And it's because you put a cheeky thing out. You tagged Jordan Peterson on a Facebook message saying I could help you with your YouTube ads. And I'm like, yes, I want to speak to Tom, definitely. Okay, so the format is, you can let us know how you've got on with that. The format is literally kind of how you are qualified to talk to us about marketing. I know your speciality is YouTube ads. So kind of how you're qualified to talk to us about that, how you feel about marketing, kind of how you engage with your clients and what you offer to your clients, and then also kind of your recommendation and your experience of going through this crazy situation that we found ourselves in the last 12 months. So the beginning is, how are you qualified to talk to us about marketing?
Good question. So marketing in general, I feel like I have a few tricks up my sleeve, but I'm probably not the best generalist in the world. My specialist area is YouTube advertising, as you mentioned. And so that's where I can go really deep. I've been doing it for 8 years. Like prior to that, I was doing a lot in video. I was doing a lot in the SEO world. And I started moving into more of the advertising space. So I think I was probably one of the first people to be advertising on the YouTube ad platform. Since then, we've done everything in a performance-based model in our agency. So instead of me working with clients and doing a traditional model where we will, most agencies will charge a monthly fee and a percentage of ad spend. That'll be the typical setup for most agencies. The way that we do things is different. What we do instead is we say to the client, we'll do it purely performance-based. So we'll fund the advertising and clients pay us for an agreed result. So that's normally a good lead in, so to speak, to be like, I can talk about this because my job is to get results for clients. If that didn't happen, then I wouldn't have an agency. And I'm glad to say the agency is going very well. And we have some amazing clients that we work with, but it does feel like a partnership with all of our clients, because we're only going to take clients on that we can actually feel that we can get a great result with them, and clients we'd want to work with because we know it's going to be a long-term partnership. It's not going to be the sort of thing where we'll run it for 3 months and then they'll say, great, I'm going to move on to the next agency. We are partnered in such a way where like, we're in it for the long run and we're willing to put all of our resources into this. So we have a whole team of experts that are great on the scripting, the storyboarding, the editing, the running the accounts, and the account management and everything else that goes with it. We are kind of like, once we have a client on board, we're all in with them. It just means that we have to be very careful about who we work with at the agency, which is called viewability. And so that's one part of what we do. And then the other part of what we do is we have another company called Ad Buyers Club. And there is like the training aspect to running YouTube ads. So there we'll train companies and almost like we say training, it's more mentoring. We have the online training and things like that, but we don't really sell that. We say, look, we're going to mentor with you for a period of time, normally 12 months. we turn people into YouTube ad buying pros, and we've had some amazing results there as well. Like people are spending now over $2 million a month on YouTube ads. That's USD, not some lower currency. And so that would only be working if it was very profitable and could scale. So I feel like in a unique position where I know that we have an agency doing this, but also I train people doing this as well. So from that perspective, YouTube ads I can talk about all day long. And but if you were to ask me more generally about marketing, there's probably better people out there for that.
Okay, no, that's cool. I'm really interested to speak to you about YouTube ads. As I've told you already, I kind of have a vested interest because I'm about to test the water with some advertising. I'm producing all this content and I need to kind of push it a little bit harder. So that's interesting. And it's kind of interesting that you are so specific, because I don't know if I have been as complimentary. The thing is, I think that marketing has been revolutionized clearly by digital, and it's become much more specialist and it's become much more technical. And I think that has made it more complicated and less accessible. And I feel like it's all become compartmentalized. Whereas I'm a marketing generalist and I want to sit down and perform a strategy with someone, and I know enough about all of these things and where they fit into the puzzle. And so I'm interested to speak to you about that. So I've just said a lot and you've not said very much, and you're the interesting one in this conversation. So how do you how do you feel about that?
Very much so. I think that like the two aspects to running YouTube ads is that you've got to have one foot inside of the creative world, which is where I think everything's heading anyway. And you have to have another foot in the analytical ad buying world as well, which is the more complicated technical setup. And
Right.
getting really good at YouTube ads, you have to bridge those two pieces. So it's very rare for someone to go into YouTube advertising and say like they can nail it. It's normally a team effort, or someone who's had just years of experience of doing it. I know that when I first started out, I came from a more of a creative side and had to learn the technical side, and I'm not natural at that. I can see it as a puzzle to figure out, but I wouldn't say my deep down natural part of me is very analytical. I can do it very well from a maths standpoint, and I've come from that world as well when I did all my studies at university and things. So I kind of have an appreciation for it, but it's not a passion of mine to be diving into numbers all day and working with the numbers. The bigger aspect of this is the creative, and that's where you are pretty much looking at the brand and the strategy and what's going to take for someone to see your video and make a decision to click and go buy. That's not easy. That's the bit which eludes most people, because they get comfortable in the numbers and can't appreciate the creative, or get so romantic with the creative side they forget about the numbers. And it's that marrying of those two pieces that really makes for a good YouTube ad buyer. So back to your point, definitely I feel like there's a movement which has been over the last 10 years or so, where everything's getting more and more analytical and very data driven, and which I fully appreciate. We're starting to move away from that now, because a lot more data the world is changing, and Apple and Facebook are having their arguments. Apple are not letting much of the data get back to Facebook. That's going to make it very difficult for Facebook. But we're just at the start of this overhaul and this reform basically in the industry. And with that in mind, we've got to, as ad buyers, got to look at the creative aspect and say, we're not going to have the numbers we once had. We're not going to have all this data generating these perfect audiences for us. It's not going to be as easy any longer. We've got to get good at storytelling, video from a messaging standpoint, and make sure we know how to psychologically turn someone from a viewer into a customer. How you do that I'm more than happy to dive into that. And it's the struggle that we'll have over the next 5 years.
Okay. Man, this has got interesting quickly. So there's two things that you've said that I want to come back to. So the first, you're doing this on a performance basis, so not on a commission basis. You're actually funding the ads yourselves. We need to talk about that. And then there is, which I had no idea of. So you're saying Apple, is this through the Safari browser, aren't providing Facebook or YouTube with the data, so they can't provide you with the data. So is that what you're saying?
I mean, this gets complicated when we're in the depths of it right as we talk now. And the new iOS 14 update from Apple will block a lot of the data going back to Facebook. So this is only happening majorly on Facebook right now. It's going to be different on Google and other platforms. But basically what's happening is Apple are saying way too much data is being shared across multiple platforms and apps, and they don't like it. So if you're going to use an iOS device, and that's normally going to be your iPhone, or it could be a tablet, for example. When you go to like Facebook, there'll be an update very soon if you haven't had it already, which will say a prompt from Apple to say, would you like Facebook to track your behavior? And I mean, I don't know exactly the wording they're going to choose, but basically it's written in such a way where you'll say, not a chance. I don't want advertisers to have all my data. Thank you very much. And you'll press no. And that'll be the one decision you make, and you're opting out of data, basically. So when you use your app on your phone, what'll happen is that as you see an ad that will now be not personalized to you, so you'll start seeing probably more irrelevant random ads. You'll still see as many ads, but they just won't be relevant anymore. So it's not actually that great for the user, I don't think. That's to be seen. What'll happen is that if you go click and buy, the Facebook advertiser will see that you've made that purchase. That conversion will go through and you'll see that in your ad account. Probably won't be as accurate as it once was. I'll come back to accuracy and attribution in a minute if you want me to. But the fact is that if someone clicks that ad and outside of that 1 day window, and this is still up in the air of exactly what this is going to mean for everybody, if it's outside of that 1 day window, so you click an ad and buy in 3 days time, let's say, Facebook, the actual ad platform won't know about it or won't be able to report it to you because Apple won't give that data back to Facebook. I'm probably simplifying it a little bit. There's so much more complication that goes on. And I might be talking out of turn a little bit because I'm not the expert on this area. But basically, what's going to happen is that Facebook can't get all that data back in. And that's how they build their custom audiences, their lookalike audiences and everything like that. And it's going to get patchy. They're starting to work on models that'll hopefully be able to use machine learning to predict it. Whether that's going to be accurate, I don't know or not. But basically, at the end of this, Facebook's going to be a really turbulent time until they find a model that will kind of work at some level. And if you're very, very data focused and building audiences of Facebook focused, your ad performance is going to go terribly. You've got to start looking at it from a standpoint of what do we want to say to our customers so that we know there's a very good chance of those people becoming customers. We're not going to be able to track everything as accurate as we would like. We can track it in our CRM more accurately, but we can't get that data back into the ad account very easily. You can do it with things called Facebook click IDs and Google click IDs. You can get that data back in, but it's not going to be able to build you further audiences off that. So this conversation goes much more complicated, much deeper, and we're still in the midst of it. So I don't know what the outcome will be, just that I know we're in for a very turbulent time. And this is just the start of what will happen over the next 5 to 10 years.
Wow. Okay, so this is kind of relevant also, I think, to why people find it difficult to invest in marketing because and especially digital marketing, it's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving, and it's getting more technical and more difficult, and it's hard to stay on it. But this is the point that I've made. I've been saying to people that I've worked with, that I've trained since 2008, make hay while the sun shines, because it can't it can't be this good forever, you know? And we've seen that with like Facebook, EdgeRank, everything has got demonstrably worse for the marketer, you know, arguably for the user. Okay, so that's really interesting. And Facebook, you're talking about Facebook because you build audiences from from Pixel and those kinds of things? Is that
I'm talking about Facebook because it's happening there most now.
right?
Google, it's slightly different. Remember, the Facebook really, for most people, is an app. And that's, if they've got an iOS device, that's where you go for Facebook. Now, some people will use Facebook on their desktop. I don't know how much of a percentage of it will be. It depends on the different businesses, but I know it's going to be more on mobile devices. With Google, they're switching how they're doing the tracking, and they're being a bit clever about it, so that Google have got about probably about 50 times more data on people because they've been around for a lot longer. And also you use Google in so many different ways. They've got, like, if you use your Google Maps, if you use Google Sheets, Google Docs, if you've got G Suite or whatever it's called now, if you use Gmail, if you're using the Google platform, if you're using YouTube, they can get data on you from everywhere. And it's not just because you're logged in as a user, they're getting information from everywhere. They're changing their tracking behavior or their tracking methods. And as a result of that, they're bypassing this issue with Apple so that this prompt won't come up for you. You can still opt out if you really want to as a user. You have to kind of find it though in your settings and go in, and no one's going to do that. But you're not getting this prompt. And this, I mean, it's just first wave. So I'm not sure what's going to happen in the next 5 years and 10 years. But I know that Apple don't want data being shared so freely. And I think it's a good thing. I think the world is going to be a better place and social media be a better place, because you're not going to get this, we're not going to get so many issues with what advertisers are doing. And it's going to change the world from an advertising perspective. But Google will be, I think, a little bit more delayed. They have a much more data, so they can predict more accurately, and they can start to get data back into your account with better accuracy, is my prediction. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. And how much of an impact it will have, because how many people are using the app to make a purchase. Lots of people are using Google and YouTube on desktops and multiple other platforms as well, and they can stitch all that data together. So I don't think Google are going to get hit quite so hard, but because Facebook's more of a isolated app by itself, that's going to get hit hard first, and we'll see where we go from there. But it's almost like all-out war for Apple and Facebook, and it feels like Google and Apple have worked and collaborated together through this period. So it feels, for me, I'm just purely YouTube, so I don't know this inside out, but I just know that if entrepreneurs who are using Facebook ads as a main source of their traffic right now, and they're not really savvy, they're in trouble. That, like, I would prefer to say it now. It's almost like now is the time to do something about it. And the way to do it, to kind of get ready for it, is to understand how to track your customers most accurately. Platforms like Wicked Reports is a great thing to invest in, because whilst it's expensive, you can start to get all the data into your account and see exactly what's happening. And then you can see how you relay that back into your ad account. But it's like flying blind soon, and Facebook just won't be able to help you. And that'll be a big problem.
Okay. And do you think that this is, Apple are doing this for the good of the users and the good of the world? Or do you think there must be some commercial aspect to this? They don't want Facebook being as successful or benefiting from their users commercially, maybe. I don't know. I'm cynical.
No, yeah, it's not, I understand. And I think that it wouldn't surprise me if Apple bring out an advertising platform soon. That would not surprise me. And so it might be kind of a bit of warfare in that way. Like, we're going to get all the ad buyers and all the activity happening on Apple now, not on Facebook so much, and make it more difficult for other platforms. That's a little cynical maybe from me, but I don't put it past Apple. Apple make their money from selling products, right? And they create products for their users, and they want their products to be as best as possible. And if you're using apps where you're getting frustrated with those apps, that's coincided with your experience on the iPhone. And as a result, they're going to be like, well, we don't want the experience to be bad. Why is it bad? Oh, it's because they're tracking people in this way. That's not great. We can stop that from happening. And therefore this product becomes better for our user. I think that Apple are quite right in that stance. I think it's actually a very, very good thing. I much prefer that than governments trying to come in and try and sort things out, because you can, if you ever saw like how Zuckerberg was treated when they were trying to get into the understanding of how all this data is being shared, they just didn't have a clue what they were even talking about. And so it's not like governments can step in. Someone like Apple can step in and has done a very good job of that. But the thing that I think is the overriding problem with someone like Facebook, and I'm an advertiser, so I'm speaking from this as a user's perspective. I love getting lots of data and using it to run better ads. Like, don't get me wrong, that's kind of my day in, day out. But when a platform like Facebook is using all this data to continue showing you ads, you end up realizing that the user's not independent. The user is the product. That's what kind of that's what Apple will say, is that you end up in a situation where, like, without the users, there is no Facebook. It's not anything but the users, and the users are being exploited for ads, and the profit of that is just going back into the Facebook platform. I don't know how I feel about that. I've got mixed feelings around it, but I know that something has to change, and I'm glad that Apple are doing it rather than like legislation from governments. So yeah, I mean, it feels like I'm right at the edge of where I know where we're at right now, and I don't know how to talk about it more without getting lost myself. And I have opinions, but they're not founded in lots of facts because they just aren't the facts yet. So I feel like I'm out of my depth a little bit going any further on this topic. But it's a big moment, and I think it's a good time for YouTube advertising, because I don't think we're going to get hit nearly as hard. However, we're still going to get hit for sure. It's just more that, like, we have to prep as best as possible for the upcoming changes.
Okay, cool. I don't need you to go. You've already blown my mind, man. I had no idea this was going on. So you don't need to get any more technical, any more detailed. We're good. What did I want to say? What I wanted to say is, because this is going, you'll have seen the social dilemma thing. I got really mad about the social dilemma thing. So I want to check in with...
That was the Netflix thing, right?
It was the Netflix thing, yeah.
That's exactly what we're talking about here. Like, Facebook have all this data on us.
Yes.
Are using it and exploiting the user, really.
Yes. And I can imagine if I was Apple, I wouldn't want another corporation taking my customers and turning them into product. That's, of course, you wouldn't want that. And Apple could come up, when you say Apple could come up with an ad platform, are you talking about a social media? Because is that what it would have to be?
No, I think that it's just ads coming up on your phone. You know, like it doesn't have to be on a social media platform. It's just like, like, I'm sure they can get ads in front of us in multiple ways based on whatever app you're using. And like, they'll have a whole heap of different ways of getting ads in front of us for sure.
Yes. Okay, so we're talking iOS devices. We're not talking desktops. Mac desktops aren't a significant enough part of the market. Okay, so that's interesting. YouTube, if you access it, I'm not an iPhone user, but I imagine it's the same as on my Android. If I access YouTube, it's through the app. So there could be something there, or you just think that Apple and Google are playing more nicely together?
They're kind of working together to get to an end result that kind of works based on Apple's hard stance.
Right.
So again, like, there's been like one of a series of 4 presentations from Google at this stage of like how to prepare and what this is going to mean. And the biggest thing that I've noticed from that so far is that 2 things that will be coming from Google and YouTube is that, one, they won't have the prompt for users to opt out. So that will bypass that because they're changing their conversion tracking model. And the second thing, as well, as because Google have so much more data on us and can collect data from multiple places, they'll be much better at predicting what happens, so that when we're running the ad accounts, we can normally see a bit more accuracy. Accuracy is such a huge thing, though, because attribution and accuracy, like if you run an ad from YouTube, let's say, for example, I ran an ad from YouTube and you saw my ad, Now, you might have loved that ad and thought this is brilliant, but didn't click because either you're kind of not ready to click, you had something else in your mind, but you're like, hey, I like that guy, maybe. And from there, you may then go to Google and type in Tom Breeze or whatever you would type in, viewability or ad buyers club or something. And you type it in, you do your more research, and then you'll go buy potentially. Okay. Now, in that instance, you can start to say, well, what happened there? Because you saw my ad and then you went to Google, maybe you saw a different ad of mine that's running on Google, and then you bought. And I can probably see that in my account. In fact, I know I could, but how much do you weight the conversion based on what your interaction was? Like, would you say that YouTube did the work and turned you into a customer, or did Google do the work and turned you into a customer? Because without both, that would never have happened. Like if you went to YouTube and you saw it and then you Googled me, couldn't find me and lost interest, and then all of a sudden you're no longer a customer. So the Google ad did something. It was the last thing you clicked on before you became a customer. But that would never have worked if it wasn't for YouTube, and YouTube would have never worked if it wasn't for Google. That bit's quite easy because it's one platform and you can kind of start to see the interaction there. But things get a little bit more complicated when you don't do it on a Google platform. So let's say, for example, you click on my ad on YouTube, you go to my website or a page or a blog page or something along those lines, you interact on that page. And I say, if you spend more than 2 minutes on this blog page, then I want to drop a pixel on you, a remarketing or a retargeting pixel on you. And then 7 days later, you see an ad of mine that is targeting you based on that recent behavior on my website. You now see an ad from me on Facebook. And at that point, Facebook then advertises to you. You'll see the ad on Facebook, you click and buy. That gets a little bit more complicated because you're saying, well, the Facebook ad would never have even appeared if you weren't on my website to begin with. And so how do you weight the ads at that point? And then you've got an even more troubling aspect, which is, well, what if I'm a bigger brand and I'm running TV ads, radio ads, billboard ads, and I could never track you in the first place? What happens then? And things get really complicated then because you're like, well, how do I actually weight the conversion? Like if I had a billboard ad and then you clicked, oh, no, you can't click on a billboard ad, but then you went to Google and searched and you saw my Google ad, you clicked on it, waited 3 days, and then you saw a Facebook ad and then you bought. Like, well, what was the customer journey? Like, do we just attribute that all to Facebook because that was the last click? Or do we look at everything else that happened and things we can't even track as well? So when people talk about accuracy, they're normally, most laymen are talking about the last click. Like, what was the last thing you clicked on to become a customer? And I'm going to take it all from there. And so that's what they deem as accurate. And so there's no such thing as accuracy in the first place. You're just looking at trends of data. You're saying, all right, that Facebook retargeting ad works really well, but something was happening over here that created that a bond with the brand or an experience with the brand. And then they just happen to see the Facebook ad and click from there and go buy. So then you're saying to yourself, well, if we're going to take a step back from this and realize that all of this can't be tracked anyway, we're just tracking a limited amount of data and then we're deeming that as completely accurate, you're still dealing with a whole myriad of different experiences that people can have, and then they go buy. And that's what I'm trying to say, is that it doesn't matter about all this tracking to a certain extent. You want to try and be as accurate as possible so you can see the trends of the data, but it's just that. It's just trends. And so when you're looking at all of the exposure you're doing, and if you get bigger, it gets more complicated. If you're smaller, you can kind of niche it down and become a little bit more siloed with your approach. But you've got to look at it from a standpoint of, what if I'm trying to track everything, don't forget the message and the connection you have with a customer is far more important. If you see a killer billboard ad that's just amazing and people rave about it and talk about it and share it everywhere, but you can't track any customers from that accurately. I mean, you could do a separate URL perhaps and have a unique offer on there, but if you just got a big brand, you're not going to be able to do that. If it was like a Prada, for example, and it was an amazing ad, and everyone then types in Prada and go buy, Prada have got a problem on their hands because they're like, well, not a problem, but they've got like a a load of new customers and it's working really well, but they're just going to have to attribute it in a way that makes sense to them. But they're not going to be able to have the numbers in a spreadsheet or numbers on an ad account that proves that. It's going to be far more difficult to see that data. But does that mean just because you can't track it, you wouldn't run that billboard again? Of course not. You would continue running it. So you've got to look at the trends of the data and you've got to get really clear with the messaging you want to have. And data is getting more and more sketchy regardless, and it's only going to get worse as we go on. So you've got to start focusing a lot more on what impact you're having with your customers through your ads, and not look at everything as, well, if the data doesn't support it, we've got to turn it off. Get as much data as you can and try and see those trends as accurate as possible, so you know what to keep on doing and stop doing. But on the whole, if you're very profitable because your messaging is good, life becomes a lot easier.
Wow. Can I just say, this is exactly the conversation I was hoping to have. Exactly the conversation. Because there's another two things. I'm going to have to start writing stuff down if you're going to drop two amazing points every time you open your mouth. Right. So remind me, the first one was the first one, you're funding ads. I think you answered the second one because I answered that second. Okay. So the second thing here is you're talking about the customer journey. And I really want to talk to you about that, because that for me is an issue. That for me is a challenge for specialists like you. So I want to talk to you about that. The third thing that you said is basically about the data becoming less and less, or sketchy is the word that you used. So let's use that word. Now, I'm not operating, I'm a generalist. I'm running some campaigns for some customers still. Yesterday, we had occasion to look, like, clearly, I haven't been marketing my website for 6 years, and we've just started again, and it's all looking nice. We've trebled things in a month. You know, it's easier when the number's really small to start with. But we had occasion to go and look at we look every month at the Search Console data, and it's clearly broken, because on analytics, it's telling us that we've had X number of visitors and or clicks and from search, and on Search Console, it's giving us a much smaller number. So it's broken. Okay, so now we have to look. And then we start looking at a few clients and comparing. And what we realize is that the two sets of data from Google, not Google, YouTube, Google, are completely conflicting. So we concluded.
But do you care?
Well, I do care if I'm reporting it to a client, because they might come back to me and say, we need you to justify this because we're looking at something. So this is where it gets sketchy. Do you know what I mean? I don't particularly care. I think as long as what I'm interested to do in my reports for my clients is report progress. And as long as there's progress, everyone's happy. So as long as I'm like, we always go to Search Console for the data. We never had pause to go and check it against analytics. So that's fine. So I think the temptation is now to say, okay, but analytics is reporting more. Let's use that data in advance, and we'll get a hit in 1 month, and then it will go terrible after that. So, but that gives people a sense. Now, I would have known this when I was proactively winning customers and running lots of campaigns. I would have known this, and I did know this. But yesterday, when I came to look at it again, it still shocked me that the data could be so different. This goes to the core of digital marketing. Like, you and I and everyone we know in digital marketing has pitched digital marketing because of the data, because of the knowability, because it's not like putting up a billboard. It's not like running a TV ad. It's not like putting an ad in a magazine. You can see exactly what's working. You can see exactly what's effective. And then you can go to the level you've taken it with YouTube, and you can turn that screw infinitely to get more and more and more value. So the question is then, is digital marketing in trouble if the data is not going to be available any longer?
Digital marketing is not in trouble. People that think that digital marketing is about data are in trouble.
Right.
That's the difference. Like, it's like those people saying, oh, stop doing the TV ads because we can't track it. It's like, what? What are you talking about? That's ridiculous. Like, ones of the TV ads were the best thing you had. You just because you can't track it, you're going to stop it. That's the worrying thing. And then people are black and white with it. They poo-poo it immediately to be like, can't track it, no point. It's like, what? Like, we run some campaigns for some, and we're always performance-based, but we do campaigns for massive brands and household brands. I don't want to mention any right now, but like household brands that you would know. Maybe not in Bali, but definitely in the UK and US and things like that. With those guys, there's two things. Okay, so if they've been going crazy on brand and brand awareness, that digital marketers normally hate, because I can't track it, and there's no end result. Or they can track it, but it's not as easy. But if they did like a massive TV ad campaign for this big brand, it's a digital marketer's nightmare, because you're like, well, what results did that bring in? I couldn't track it, and it's not easy, right? Unless you get a very direct response type TV ad, and then you had it running at 4 o'clock in the morning or something, and then be like, 4 o'clock in the morning, we saw this big peak, so we're going to attribute that all to that advert we ran. But big brands run ads all the time. Now, if they stop that activity and then say, right, no more ads are running, and we start running their performance-based campaigns, we'll start running them, and we'll notice that we get great results. And we can normally sit back and be like, oh, the power of the brand, right? Like, our performance ads are so much easier to run because everyone are thinking about that brand or are aware of that brand. And you almost like, it's like, well, that's just that brand. Like, that's just Prada. Of course, Prada are going to convert. It's like, yeah, they had to spend a fortune on branding so you know who that brand is in the first place and get in your brain so you remember who they are. And then that is such a powerful asset for years to come. So anytime you run a performance-based campaign and they see it's from Prada, I don't know why I keep on using Prada, but you get the point. You're going to be like,
they aren't going to be sending you handbags on the fact
no,
that
I mean, I can try as hard as I can, right? I mean, my weekend get up is not going to look right without it, but there we go. But the fact is, like, you can look at your performance-based campaigns, you'd be like, guys, we're working with one of the biggest brands in the world. Of course, the performance-based campaigns are much easier to get good results on, because everyone knows who this is and everyone trusts the brand and everyone's got great experience, and you've got all the elements that you would want to run a really good performance-based campaign. But it cost them a fortune to get that in the first place. And so people ignore all that hard work that is the brand piece. That's probably the most valuable piece, just because it's not trackable easily. And people are like, well, sod that, don't do that. Just focus on the ads that turn a customer from cold to a new customer in that one experience. And you're like, that's hard. That's I mean, that's what I do all day. That is hard. And so it's not as easy as it's easy when you know what you're doing, but it won't be easy forever, because platforms get more complicated, more difficult to run, and it's not simple. But that's kind of why people should not look at digital marketing as a get in, do it, and kind of like see what sort of results they can get. It's like, this is a career. You got to be in it for the long run and ride those waves, because I've been through the SEO waves where everything was brilliant and then everything was cut away. I've been through the ad journey where everything was brilliant and then everything was cut away from me. And we're in another situation now where data is being freely available for everybody, and it just won't be that way in the space of a few weeks, and in the space of a few years, it just won't be available for people. But doesn't mean I'm going to stop, and doesn't mean I'm going to, because I can't track things, doesn't mean that it's not working. It's just, you've got to look at the trends, look at a little bit broader picture, get as much data as you can, but know that you're going to be dealing with limited data. In the way that Mike Rhodes, who's a brilliant advertising expert, very, very good on the Google side, he explains it by saying, let's imagine that you were to go to a pub and you were to have 10 pints. And so you're going to get drunk unless you're a real, I mean, for me, 5 is probably fine for me. But if you were to have 10 pints that evening, or you can swap some of those drinks. So you can say, right, instead of that pint, I'll have a gin and tonic or something. But you know you're going to have a good night with that much drink in you. And then in the morning afterward, you've got a hangover. How do you attribute that hangover? You don't say, do you know what? It was that fourth beer that I had. That was the one that got me. The rest of them, nothing involved with any of that. Like that was just precursors. That was just nothing. But that fourth one really got me. That's how advertisers are thinking about it at the moment. They're thinking that one action caused the result, and it's not. It's all 10 actions cause the result. And how do you track that? You track it as best you can, look for the trends of the data. But at the end of the day, that one beer wouldn't have got you drunk. 10 beers got you drunk, and they all work together. And you've got to look at that from that perspective. And if you swapped one of those beers out with a tequila chaser, then that probably had more of an impact. But I'm sure you can kind of get the idea here. It's a whole theme of activity that's going on. So when people look at the data of like, oh, well, here's how much my blog traffic got and things, that's useful, but it's not where it ends. At the end of the day, as a performance marketer from my side, I'm saying to the client, what's going to make this work and make you really, really happy? And they're like, well, at the end of the day, we've got to sell this. I'm like, fine. Now let's focus on doing that. And it might be that we have to do some branding activity here. It might be we have to do some kind of ads over here that are much more performance based. As a YouTube advertiser, I'm kind of lucky because I get that whole experience from a YouTube ad itself, because you can run a long ad and you can get all those elements into the ad and create a really clever ad and do the lead gen or do the customer acquisition model that you need to push. And you get all of that in one sitting with YouTube, which is why I like YouTube so much. But it's people have to take a step back and realize that it's not that one ad did all the heavy lifting. It was everything that went into it.
Good. I do this because when I teach digital marketing, I play what I do it for the Digital Marketing Institute. So I call it Digital Marketing Institute Fantasy Football Manager Digital Marketing Channel something. And so what I do is I've got the logos. I've got 11. Yeah. It's really catchy. Yeah, it's flying. It's flying. So what I do is I put all the logos on and I say, okay, your job is to put these in kind of the formation. So which of the digital marketing chat platforms do you put in goal? Which ones are your defense? Which one are your midfields? Feeding the attackers, scoring the goals. And it doesn't really matter what formation they end up in. It's a great rest for me because the group will argue for half an hour about it. So it's fantastic. And it doesn't matter what they come up with. What's important is for me as like an integrated marketer, because that's what I kind of push. You have to do everything and find what works. For me, what's important is that people understand the different roles that the different platforms play in the customer journey. And I think you're right. Apart from YouTube is only one of those platforms. So that brings us brilliantly back to this idea of a customer journey. So for me, I know it's more complicated than this, but for me, all of the things that you kind of tend to talk about are display advertising, which is about generating awareness, which is absolutely 100% necessary. People don't think about that. There are things, so it's all kind of brand marketing, which is hugely, hugely powerful, of course, and necessary. But it is still display marketing, display advertising, like the billboard, like the TV, like the magazine ad. And you've said already that this is hard work, taking people from that to customer, to action. So this is nice because this brings us back to the first point, which is about you funding the ads. So explain to us how that's different from me taking out a full page ad in the Guardian for my customer, me paying for it and getting paid on the basis of the performance of that when you've told us already how difficult it is to actually attribute any of these things.
Good. Okay, yeah. So when we do performance-based advertising, we're not doing the brand piece. I'm saying that piece is really important and most digital marketers forget about it because it can't be tracked. And it's such an important piece, but we don't do it. We're not brand advertisers, we're direct response advertisers. So we're like saying, hey, it's just easier if they've done all the branding activity beforehand, much easier.
Okay.
So there's a huge amount of value in that. But that's kind of where you're talking about, like where the digital marketing space is going. I think that people are going to have to start investing a lot more in their brand in order to get better results. And that's always been true. It's just that we've got away with having great data, which has made it easy to run those performance-based campaigns, which is going away. Now, from a performance-based activity, if you were to take a full page out in the Guardian, let's say, I don't know how much that would cost. Let's say it's going to cost you $500,000 to run a big campaign like that in the Guardian newspaper. Then what you would need to do is you would need to feel comfortable with the fact that you can send them somewhere that would be unique for that activity. So let's say, for example, there was an exclusive offer, and the only place you can get that from, if the brand name was something like, and it couldn't be Prada if you did that for Prada, for example, because people just know the brand Prada. But if it was like a new brand that no one's seen of before, but they're like, hey, I've not seen this brand before, that's pretty cool, you would want to have an exclusive URL for them. And you could be like, I don't know if it was, give me a brand, because I just thought of something that's probably wildly inappropriate. So think
The
if you can think of a
effective
brand.
marketing company.
An internet marketing company. Okay, fine.
The
So you
effective
might,
marketing company.
effective marketing, did you say?
Yes, yes.
Okay, effective marketing company. So you might buy the domain name efm.com if you can afford it and it's available. It's efm.com, and you might say, go there, and it's the page it's the website you build purely for this offer. And so you send traffic there. Then any traffic that hits that page, you know it's come from one of your billboard or your Guardian ad activity. And then you can say, right, that traffic is purely from that ad. It can't get there from anywhere else because no one's searching for EFM. EFM might be too broad, but you get the idea. You can kind of go for something unique.
Yes.
And then from there, in the website itself, you could track everything there. You're not going to be able to track everything 100%, but you're going to have a far easier time of keeping an eye on what worked. Now, if you can do the same thing on YouTube as well, but you actually have a clickable link on YouTube. So you can send them to a very specific website or a page on a website, and you can track that pretty accurately.
Or you could give them, is it a UTM link?
So yeah, UTM links is great.
Some of that data. Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
You also get, so you can get the UTM data, which is like where you say it came from this campaign, this targeting method, this ad, and I have a long string of data, basically, of UTMs on the end of your domain name. And that's useful. That could be auto-generated as well from running your ads. But you also get something called a Google Click ID. And a Google Click ID is where Google will naturally append a Google Click special code, basically, on the URL itself. So then if you did sign up inside of my CRM, if I'm the client, inside of my CRM, I'll be able to find that data to be like, you came in under that Google Click ID, and I can track that. And then you can get that Google Click ID to import back into your ad account. So that will give your ad account exactly the information you need from that. So you can get that data back into your account. It's just, it's not going to be able to be used in the way that Facebook want to use it. It's just purely reporting it rather than building more data off the back of that activity. So you can still see what's happening inside your account. You do need a bit of software. You can do it manually, but it's probably best to get a bit of software like Wicked Reports. Hyros is another one. And there's platforms out there that can do it for you. And then do all the UTM tracking and that type of stuff as well. But it means that you can get very accurate data that way. I would never send traffic to a page without those UTMs, or well, you're always going to have the Google Click ID. But I would want to be making sure that the client can get really clear with my traffic as I send it through. And then from there, I can look at the next milestone that I'm getting paid out on, whether it be a lead, a sale. I'll try and track as everything I can. But again, it's trends of data. And what we're looking to say is like, okay, well, through that activity, how many of those people became customers? Their CRM won't lie. If you've got 100 customers, you've got 100 customers in your CRM. There's no doubting that. Or through your shopping cart or whatever it is, you're going to see like, that's exactly what it is. That's how much money is in the bank. I can't deny that. That is what's happened. Whether you still show 100 sales in your ad account is different. You're probably not going to see 100 sales, you're probably going to see maybe 80 sales, and in the future it might be 60 sales in your ad account. And that's where you're working with trends of data. You're saying, I know there was 100, but from my ad account, it's seeing 60. I can support that with doing the G-Clit upload and get 100 back into the account as well, because I can do it very, very accurately like that. But on the whole, like when I'm doing performance-based advertising, I'm saying to the client, what's a trackable end result that I can get paid out on that you would feel very comfortable paying a certain amount on? And that's the figure we try and work towards. And then attribution is always going to be a question mark, but if they know they're happy to pay that price, then that's what I get paid for.
Okay, so let's come back to this. You can't track the display brand type stuff, because actually you can. But what they don't want to do is they don't want to compare apples with apples. So in the old days, which you're not old enough to remember, but I am just about, I started selling advertising in magazines, and we lied to them. And we had certificates that lied to them. They were like industry certificated lies. But what?
The best ones.
But what?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was literally, we had readership certificates that said basically 3.5 people read every issue that we send out. So our circulation is X, and our readership is 3.5 times that. They had no way of knowing that. They had no way of knowing that. So it was a complete lie. So for me, there's kind of a scale. You go from the billboard, you might know what the traffic flow is past that billboard. You don't have no idea how many people are going to look up. You have no idea how many people are going to care. And then you go through newspaper magazines, so you can say, well, at least we're in the women's fashion section with our Prada ad. So we get a sense of how many people we get, know how many are sold, blah, blah. And that goes all the way through something like Facebook, where Facebook, somebody I know, somebody who's quite a respectable lecturer in digital marketing, calls Facebook the 21st century publishing fraud. Because basically what they are is publishers, and they've never paid anyone to produce anything. It's insanely good. But then you go through to, again, to something like YouTube. And now YouTube is more interesting because YouTube is display advertising, like we could compare it to the TV, but they are offering content at least, and we've always got a sense that that content has to be supported or paid for somehow. So that kind of makes sense. But it's also a search engine. So it's where people go to ask questions. So YouTube probably falls somewhere between that and like a search page where people literally go to buy things, you know? So I see how it's valuable. But the way you're kind of hedging your bets is by making sure that you're at the sharp end. So in my fantasy football 11, you'd be the strikers because you are doing very direct response-led stuff to get people to click. And then you can track them. Good.
Yeah, exactly. And to go back to your fantasy football activity, yeah, like I would be more upfront, scoring the goals, putting the ball in the back of the net. I may be diving back into midfield to find those audiences in the first place. But with YouTube, you can do that. Like I can't survive without, well, I can survive without a brand activity, but there's certain things I can't survive without. I can't magic an ad up out of nothing. There's going to need to be some credibility of the brand. There's going to need to be a claim they can stand behind. There's going to needs to be some testimonials or some sort of method or demonstration of their product. I need those assets. Otherwise, I'm not going to create a very good ad. But I can go from scratch and say, all right, give me those bits, and I can find a cold audience and turn them into customers. And I do the very best job I can. But going back to the tracking thing, it's like the beauty of YouTube is that you're giving people an experience, and this is video, not just YouTube, but you're giving people an experience that they won't forget. Not to say they're going to go and buy immediately, but if you saw a text ad or a billboard ad, it may stay in your brain for maybe 5-10 minutes, unless it's really, really good. With a video that might be 3 minutes in length, and you're telling a story and you're giving good content and sharing with them like opportunity and get them excited, they may never forget your ad. You know, it's quite a big impact. And so what I'm saying is that, like, don't just because it's not clicking and people aren't going to buy at the same rate as something else that was really spammy and clickbaity, that's people like, oh, I want to click that and get that thing, and then get there and they're disappointed. If you have that amazing ad and it really motivates people and excites them and sees it's a new opportunity, you don't have to ask for the click right then to get the click-through rate up. You might just be like, hey, that's a big moment for the brand. Terrible click-through rates doesn't matter. People don't buy from it, didn't really matter, because you've got a great experience in front of people. And then next touch point, they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember this brand. And that first impression really makes a difference, you know. I very rarely pitch anything to anybody. Like the agent, we don't do too much outbound marketing in our agency, or outbound marketing in Ad Buyers Club. We do calls like this and stuff, but it's always value first. So people might one day want to become a YouTube ad buyer, and they'll be like, actually, hang on a second, maybe I should go and learn from Tom. Or if they've got a company, they might think, actually, do you know what? Maybe let's go to viewability and use them. But I'm not interested in saying like, okay, here's my call to action off the back of this podcast or something. Like, because it's not important to me. I'm much prefer to put a good message out there, build a brand of people saying, Tom Breeze is the YouTube ads guy. Go to him for his agency, go to him for his brand, and other people carrying that message because I've given them good value. That's the piece that people forget when it's purely direct response and purely focused on doing the striker activity. It's like, I'm going back and doing like the defense, the goalkeeper and everything in your scenario.
Yes.
To build that, because then the striker's got an easy time of it.
Yes. And the thing is, I think like you, I'm a bit of a camera geek. So what I spend my money on now that I'm old is basically photography equipment. But the buyer has to go on that journey. You know, I have to see the new panning, tilting, blah, 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 maybe 400 times before I start thinking, you know what, I probably should have one of those, you know, and then I go back to YouTube because now I'm looking for reviews of that thing. And then I might Google it to see if it's actually available in the world where do you know what I mean? So you have to go on that journey. And the point I was making about,
yeah, imagine that. Like, so I think you said Canon, right, as a brand for the camera.
No, didn't say Canon, definitely not.
Okay, well that says a lot. You know who I mean by Canon, right? And you didn't like that, but who was the brand you said?
I said panning, tilting, electronic head or something is what I said. I'm a Sony user now.
Sony, okay, fine.
Yeah.
So you got geeky on me there for a second. But let's say, for example, you got Sony. Like, Sony somehow you've said just then, I'm a Sony person.
Yeah.
That says it all. That says it all.
It says it all.
You've decided to identify yourself with Sony. And they're just a brand. They're just a company. They're just doing good products and stuff. If you were to compare it to Canon, other people are going to say other things about Canon. You might not like them. You might love them. Apple do the same thing. I'm an Apple guy. Loads of people say that. Or
yes.
I hate Apple or whatever. I'm a PC person or something. You don't get many. I'm a Microsoft person. People. There we go. But that's the thing, is you've told me just then that you're a Sony guy. How much easier is it going to for me to sell you Sony stuff than it would be Canon stuff? Like, it'd be a far easier job for me to sell you Sony stuff. And that's because Sony have done all that hard work in the background for years. And
yes,
you have that immediate. And the fact that there's actually videos on YouTube about Sony cameras, to even see the reviews, says it all as well. People want to create videos about the brand. You would, if I was like the brand, if I even have had the best camera in the world, I'd have a really difficult time to sell it because I don't have a brand yet. You know, it's tough. People have to trust me on that decision. And so the trust is everything. And that's kind of why there's a lot of fly by night, fly by year, let's say, advertisers at the moment are going to get crushed with the new changes because they don't understand this. They don't understand that there's brand, there's marketing, there's messaging, because their life has been so easy up until now because data's just been there for them. They just say, I just want to run an ad to these people or build a lookalike audience of my current customers. And hey, I'm making $1 million from Facebook. It's like, yeah, you've got data on your side, but you don't have anything else. And as soon as that data gets pulled in the smallest way, they're like, well, now nothing's working. I don't have a business anymore. It's like, yeah, sorry, that's just the way life goes. You've had a good time. You forgot about your brand. And that's the piece that's that's going to be the long-lasting brands that are out there. Make a good buck, fine, when times are good. But if you're a real brand, a real company, then you don't care about really what's happening. You're saying Facebook, YouTube, any other platform that's out there is purely just an opportunity for you, but you're independent of it. You're like, hey, this is a good place to advertise right now. Might not always be, but let's go for it. Maybe it's TV, maybe it's radio, maybe it's billboards, maybe it's magazines, whatever it is, or maybe it's word of mouth, or building a good, solid relationship with your customers so they refer you all the time. There's like, we're in a weird stage where people feel like digital marketing is everything, and it's really not. It's such a small aspect of marketing in general. People think it's big, but it's really not. And people forget everything else that's out there, and people are going to get crushed because of it. It's such a shame, but that's just the future is going to be that way. And it's coincides with COVID, which is awkward timing because companies have already get hit. And the companies that are smaller, that don't have Facebook experts in their in-house team, are going to get double crushed because they'll be like, okay, we can open our doors again. Let's turn on those Facebook ads again. Wait a second. There's no data here. There's nothing here for me to get access to. Like, I can't see how to run this account properly. And it's like, it's awkward. It's a really, the timing of it, I don't like, because Apple could have chosen their timing better. And it's going to be the small guys that gets crushed and the big guys will live on. And that's not a great place to be.
It's not a great place to be. Okay, so this is the enormous power of brand. So when I teach digital marketing, I struggled at the beginning because there is a, what do they call a bit of a course? A section, I don't know, on
module?
Brand advertising. A module, there you go. I sound like a real digital marketing lecturer now. So there's a module which is on display advertising. And it used to be because they have to teach people about Google display ads. But I struggled at the beginning because I'm a digital marketer. So I was one of those people. What I say to my groups is, like, whatever his name is, John Wanamaker said in the 1850s, I know 50% of my advertising budget is effective. I just don't know which 50%. I tell people, if your team comes to you and say that, take them out into the car park and shoot them, because you don't have to do that anymore. You're teaching me the error of look at your stony face. Say something so people can see how serious you look. But less serious.
I'm concentrating on what you're saying.
But I've got this whole shtick now. So I'm also an Adidas person. So I've got this shtick where I say, I was going out to play tennis one day and I put on my Adidas shorts, my Adidas t-shirt, my Adidas socks, my Adidas thing, picked up my Adidas tennis bag, put on my Adidas cap. And only realized as I caught myself in the mirror that at some point in my life, Adidas have really done a job on me, because I don't go into the sports shop. Yeah, no, they definitely have, because I don't go into the store looking for Adidas, but I definitely leave with it. So there's something at the front. When Adidas is an option, I'll buy Adidas. And then to go back to your point about me being a Sony guy, when I started doing this, I was a Nikon person. I told people about the time I went to New Zealand to take amazing photos, and the shutter spewed oil all over my sensor, and I, hiked for days and weeks to get these photos, and they were covered in all these terrible spots. But still, I consider myself a Nikon guy, because when I went to get it cleaned in the shop, they had an I am Nikon pen, and I left with one. Do you know what I mean? We all have these brand relationships, and I do this whole thing. I'm a Manchester United fan. I use an Apple computer. I use Google Pixel phones. I buy my shirts in Next. I buy my underpants in Marks and Spencer's. I buy my jeans from Gap. But I've got these places where I continuously go to buy things, because they bought me as a customer, is what they've done. And digital marketers are idiots if they don't understand this. They don't understand it. You've just got to compare it to the other forms of brand marketing. You've got to compare it to the billboards and the TV and the press and all of that stuff. And then what you'll see is actually digital marketing is still giving you a better option, because it's telling you, for this amount of money, I got you this amount of impressions, and maybe I got you this amount of clicks. Do you know what I mean? So you're getting something. So I'm with you 100% on this. I'm with you 100%. So this is also a recurring theme, because I've spoken to a few agency type people in this. You're saying that your customers have to have a very certain criteria if you're going to be successful for them.
Yeah.
You can speak now.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to the point as well. So I'll get onto that. I think that the Wanamaker's statement of which is right. Like, it's effective, but you just don't know which part is effective. That's still the case. Even though you can track something, doesn't mean that you know the whole story. You've tracked one aspect of the story, and you're trying to make too much of a story around just that one aspect. Like, let's say, for example, you saw an advert from Adidas with, I don't know, I can't think of a good Adidas model, so to speak, but there's a sportsman that wears Adidas, for example. And you might have really aligned with that sports person. You might have really loved them and had read their story or kind of knew all about them. And then you saw them in Adidas, and all of a sudden you paired the two to be like, all right, I kind of deep down want to be that guy or that girl, and doesn't matter, whatever they stand for, and they wear Adidas. So by the nature of me wanting to be that person or share attributes with that person means that I kind of got to buy Adidas now. And as illogical as that might sound, that's how the brain works. It's we have a deep desire for something, and we're not always aware of what that desire is, and we can play on it. And it's exactly what all the adverts do on, like, if you're selling a 4x4 car, for example, they're not going to talk about in the advert, they're not going to talk about mileage and how safe it is, unless you're Volvo, perhaps. But what they're going to talk about is none of that. They're going to show you what it's like to drive that 4x4 car up the side of a mountain or go off-roading in it, and then get to a secluded beach where you can get your surfboard out and go surfing. Because you're buying that identity. You're like, I want to be that person. I want to be that person doing that thing, feeling that emotion. And so they're selling to you basically adventure. And you're like, I want more adventure in my life. And the way I do it is I buy that 4x4 car. Doesn't make complete sense to you consciously, but unconsciously, that's what wakes you up and says, I'm now motivated for that product. Same thing with if you're selling like a business franchise opportunity, or kind of like these make money online people always stand in front of cars and houses and like beautiful mansions and stuff, because they're like basically saying, if you do what I'm doing, you can be me. And a lot of people want to be that person. It doesn't necessarily align with my way of advertising. I don't like that strategy, but it works, and people hate it, people love it. Doesn't matter. Like, that's what happened. That's kind of like the deep desire in some people. And I'll give you another example as well. Like, so I bought a house recently about a year ago, and I was putting up a shelf, and I'm not a DIY person, but I have a level of like manly pride, or stereotypically manly pride with putting a shelf up. And if you've put up shelves, I'm sure you have, getting it straight is quite an anxious moment. And the reason it's anxious is because you're playing that future self out to yourself. You're saying, okay, well, if this isn't straight, I can tell you exactly what I thought. I was like, if this isn't straight, first my wife's going to look at it and she'll be fine with it. She'll be like, oh, babe, it's fine. We'll get away with it. And I know what she's thinking. It's fine, but it's really not fine. And you're not a real man. Or at least that's what I'm playing the story in my own head. And then I'm thinking, do you know what also is going to happen? My father-in-law is going to come around and he's going to see that it's not straight. And then he's going to say something about it, and I'm going to feel really awkward about it. So I was like, do you know what? I need to get a proper drill, because the drill I had I didn't trust it, basically. It's probably fine. I was like, I'm going down to the hardware store, and I went down there, and I remember talking to the person that was going to help me buy a drill, the sales rep. And he said, what sort of drill are you after? I was like, I know. I was like, that's a stupid question for me, because I have no clue, basically. I was like, all I want in this drill is to be idiot proof. I just wanted to do the job of me, but in the end he was like, all right, well, what are you doing? And I was like, putting up shelves. And he's like, okay, cool. Well, buy this one. It's really easy. It's a bit more expensive, but it's really easy to use. And then also let me show you something else that's going to help me get straight. He upsold me loads of stuff. I bought this product, but I was buying basically out of security, of saying, I'm pride and I want to keep it together. So if they had said to me, oh, here's the product that any man can use and never make a mistake with putting up shelves, I'm like, yeah, I'm in. I'm buying that one. Whatever. I don't even care how much it costs. That's the one I want. And so it's understanding what deep desires that people really have and playing into that. And you can't track that in a pixel. You can't track that in data. It's that, but that's what marketing is. And so we can't, like separate the two easily. We can measure it somewhat and look at some of the trend of data. But if you're saying I'm going to run this perfect ad which talks about this amazing drill, and then next month I need a drill, and I'm like, I remember the idiot proof one, I'm going to buy that brand. You can't track that. It's just impossible to track it. But you can, that's good marketing sense. So that's kind of on that side. I don't know if you wanted to go on any on that, but I can now talk about the type of clients we look for, if you like.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. But what you're saying is that they have to come with something if you're going to make them successful. And I think this has been the theme of this when I've been talking to agency type people, because people are resistant to marketing. And I think, and so what you have to be really careful of is making sure that you take on the right customers. So now you can tell us about the sort of people that you work with and who it works for.
Yeah, logically, we don't like marketing. Unconsciously, we love it. Like, don't forget, we love buying stuff. Like, it's a really good feeling of pressing the button and saying, I've bought, or leaving the shop with a product underhand. Like, you could argue that's what the product does in general. Like, because I know that I've bought books. I love buying books. Okay, I buy books and I feel really good about it. And I'm like, I bought that book. I walk out the store and I'm like, 15 minutes later, if I'm really honest with myself, I'm never going to read it. But I like the fact that I bought it, which is a really weird concept, because now I'm thinking, well, where is I still do it. And I still love buying books and I'm never going to read them. So what is going on there? Because maybe I'm buying out of a different choice. I don't want the content. I just want the feeling of buying something. That's quite weird. But that's where I feel a lot of people forget as well, is when it comes to the sale. It's like, how are people going to feel about the purchase? And that's probably a large part of the product. Like when I buy an Apple phone, I buy it, and when it arrives, it comes in beautiful packaging. I feel good about opening it. And as soon as I got the phone, I'm like, 15 minutes later, I'm like, it's kind of the same as the other one I had, maybe a slightly better camera, but it cost me a fortune. The emotion's gone at that point. But that motion with opening it up and feeling like, okay, I've got a new phone, it dies away pretty quick. But it's that moment I'm probably buying more than anything else. So I keep on going on tangents here, but yeah. So with regards to the clients we work with, we're looking for typically look for direct to consumer products, so B2C, direct to consumer, and we're not going for B2B necessarily. Very rare that we take on B2B clients. And we normally need to have something a little innovative so we can kind of actually create something cool around that brand. We're also looking to have like good margins. So if someone says, oh, I'm selling this fidget spinner for $5 or something, I'm like, yeah, that's going to just be too difficult to do that at any meaningful scale, or don't even get it to work in the first place. You'll go negative too quickly. And then also people that are building legit brands. Like we consult with the top brands and we help them and we guide them on their journey to getting into YouTube ads. And we do some agency work on there as well. But with with up and coming brands who've got great products, you haven't heard of them before. Those ones are kind of tend to be our sweet spot client right now, where it's like they're struggling. They might do Facebook really well, but they're struggling. They're not pure in and out digital advertisers, but they need help, and they've got great products and they really care about their customers. That's almost the best product. But the assets we're looking for typically are good level credibility, something that have really good results for their clients and it's consistent. So good testimonials. And then we're looking for like some sort of action plan that is like, it's not just, oh, we've got some cool things. It's like, oh, we've got a plan of here's how it works. Here's like the demonstration of the product or the service, so people can kind of wrap their heads around it. And some of that could be worked on with the clients. But with that, then we've got the opportunity to be a lot more creative with how we build out from there. And yeah, that typically makes a good YouTube ad customer, so to speak.
Yes. So the people who've had a rough ride in these chats have been like Pi Lopez, who's one of these guys who's always standing in front of a room full of books, or he's standing in front of a Ferrari. Or there's some people I know that do a similar thing on Facebook. So what is offensive to me as like a marketing generalist, as like an integrated marketing kind of proponent, is that this is the secret to marketing, and do this one thing with us and you will be successful. So I really don't enjoy that at all. And so there's lots of differences between you and them. You are still a specialist in YouTube, but like we've discussed, it's a display platform, it's a search engine. You know, people are there to consume content. So if your content's good enough, you can hold them. You can put in your very direct links. So you can play YouTube as a striker, I think is what I'm saying. I'm really glad that you've enjoyed the analogy and invested in the analogy. But the other thing that makes you different is that you understand that there's more to this, like the groundwork has to have been done. You know, people have to be aware of you. They have to be aware of the products and services that you provide. They have to be aware of the value in that. And they have to be somewhere near the end of that journey where they're actually ready to respond to something that's very direct and invites a response.
I mean, I'd say that definitely helps, and people should not forget that. Well, we take on clients when no one's heard of the brand before and don't know what it is. But the beauty of YouTube is you can normally hold someone's attention on a YouTube ad for up to 5 minutes in some instances. So if it's a good quality ad, people will watch it. And so you can take them from, it's like shortening up that journey from cold to warm very quickly because you have a video to do it with. And if you tell a really good story there, and then your product price is like, let's say $50, for example, you can sell that straight from cold to someone making a purchase there and then in that direct moment. Because YouTube's great for that. People will go into YouTube looking for help or looking for answers to questions. And if you provide them amazing help and then say, actually, look, there's a whole product around this. Like, let's say, for example, you said, you know what, I'm going to go to YouTube and learn about YouTube ads. And then you saw my ad and I was like, let me lay it out for you and show you how it works in 5 minutes. And then I say, go and click and go and watch my extended version of this, which will be a 25-minute video, perhaps. And then I have a $50 sale at the end of it. There's a good chance you'll go buy that, you know, because you were already searching for YouTube ads. So it doesn't have to be necessarily the brand be aware, but it's like you are solution aware. You're realizing there are people out there that can teach you YouTube ads because you're going to YouTube and looking for that in the first place. And if I'm getting in front of you at that time, it's not going to be too difficult to turn you into a customer. Because it's like, okay, cool. Can you part with $50 to learn a training of stuff you already want? Yeah, you'll probably do that. And that's the beauty of YouTube is you have that customer there with intent. You do also have like the interest-based audiences as well, but so you don't always have to put the brand out there first. And we don't, but we run ads for clients that don't have any brand exposure to the customers they're already getting, or the users are getting in front of. And so we have to build that within an ad itself and then build a whole campaign off the back of that with the client. And so YouTube works great for cold traffic. It's just, it helps if you have that brand exposure beforehand, for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. We have done, I think, 1 hour and 20 minutes already. You've been amazing, Tom. I knew you would be.
Thank you very much.
It's
good because
cool.
you ask good questions. You know, there's a lot of podcasters out there because that's when you asked and I had a look at some of the episodes. I like the way that you take the approach to this because you don't just go in it like, here's my set questions and you kind of actually interested in the answers and see where it takes you. So, which is refreshing for a podcast. I do a lot of podcasts and a lot of the time it's just like, okay, tell me how you got into YouTube ads. Okay, great. And what's next for YouTube ads? It's just, but we've gone deep into subjects. We didn't get into much YouTube ads activity, in fact. So I'm happy to come back on and talk about that one day. But yeah, but this has been very refreshing. And I love the way that you do the podcast. It's very cool.
Thank you very much. And the thing about this is that I am interested and I don't know if you knew, but I wanted to be like the small business marketing champion, like between 2005, probably when I met you around 2010. And then I realized that they don't deserve a champion. And so I stopped, but I've kind of, I feel a little bit like Oliver Stone and Platoon. Like he spent his time in the trenches and then he wanted to tell the world. And I kind of want that as well. And I think if we can have these conversations and actually dig a bit deeper and challenge a little bit, because I don't think marketing people get challenged enough. So that's kind of this part of what I'm doing. We're going to have to do this again. I think it might be in about, I don't know. I do actually have more than 11 people on the list. So I don't know, but it might be in 2 or 3 months, something like that. But I think we could come back and do a, how do people actually go about doing this? Because I think it's really interesting. And I didn't even talk to you about the social dilemma where they're telling us how clever these platforms are, and you've got no option but to buy this stuff, because I think that's junk. Because I think what you've demonstrated to us again, what's demonstrated to anyone who watches YouTube for more than 20 minutes a day, is that YouTube advertisers are typically idiots. I am never going to buy a Chinese industrial 4-floor cleaning piece of equipment. So why are they putting it in front of me? I've never done a search that suggests that I will. So, so we could go into all of that as well. I think that would be really useful. But this
just you wait. Next week you'll be buying it. You know that.
I won't. I will not ever be buying that. Maybe when I've seen it 4,000 times, I'll start thinking,
yeah.
If I find myself ever searching on YouTube for Chinese industrial floor cleaning equipment, then we'll know that YouTube advertising works.
There'll be a moment in the future where you're like, I knew I should have bought it. I knew it.
Excellent. Man, thank you so much for this. I've really thoroughly enjoyed this. And I will be back. It will be 2 or 3 months and we can do like a next level. How do you actually go about doing this? Because I think that also is good for businesses like yours. But I think these platforms have got to the point where if you're not using a specialist, like you say, if you don't have in-house people, you're kind of in trouble. If this is something you look at every 6 months, you're not going to know how it works in 6 months' time. It's really as simple as that. Okay, thank you so much, man. I will speak to you again in 2 or 3 months' time.
Sounds good, Martin. Good to speak to you, mate.
All right, thank you so much, man.